Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Kreitis. Today is May 24th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. So what took place in the markets today? Well, the S&P inched up 4 points. The Dow closed up 95. The NASDAQ gained 9. And the Russell 2000, the small cap index, was able to gain 13 points on the day, representing about a 0.9 percentage gain for the day. The Dow Jones Transports continued its decline and lost 34 points today, representing a 0.33% decline. Oil, both Brent and WTI were able to rally about 2 percentage points respectively. We have WTI at $58.89 a barrel, and Brent is trading at $69. Gold is at $1,284 an ounce. Silver is at $14.52 an ounce. The U.S. 10-year Treasury was able to gain a percentage point and now sits at 2.324%. 2.324%, able to climb higher from yesterday's almost 2-year low on the U.S. 10-year Treasury. Meanwhile, the VIX, the volatility index, lost 6% and now sits at $15.85. We continue to have some negative economic news come out, with the U.S. durable goods orders fall more than expected. New orders for U.S. manufactured durable goods fell 2.1% from a month earlier in April, reversing a 1.7% growth in March and slightly worse than market expectations of a 2% decline. Transportation equipment, down 2 of the last 3 months, drove the decrease. Orders for non-defense capital goods, excluding aircraft, dropped 0.9%. Now, let me repeat that one point. Transportation equipment down 2 of the last 3 months. That would be rather fitting with the Dow Jones Transports, wouldn't it? With how it has been rolling over here recently, has not been able to make new highs or even retouch last year's high, which to me indicates that there is trouble on the horizon. I believe we're already in the midst of trouble, which is going to become another part of our conversation for today, because the markets really were not able to rally. They did start up for the day. They pretty much traded in the green all day long. I think a lot of this was still off of the back of President Trump's comments, again, that the U.S.-China trade negotiations I think something can be done quickly. I mean, give me a break. Now, again, if you look at the results of today's close, are the markets starting to say, you know what, Mr. President, we'll believe it when we see it? Because all these tweets, all these statements, you strung us along for 6 months. We're getting sick and tired of it. I hope that's what's happening. I really do. Not to call the president's credibility into question. He's already done a good job of that himself. But now it's sort of the credibility of the market, which, of course, we talk about here all the time. It's rigged. It's just unbelievably disconnected from the underlying economy. But nevertheless, can we at least have somebody in the market where we're saying enough is enough with being strung along by a president who wants to tweet or come out and make statements before the press saying that we are going to make a deal with the Chinese? It seems, hopefully, that this is starting to fade. I really hope that that's the case, because I have a big problem with this president tweeting, as you know, and making comments that move these markets, and it's a blatant abuse of his power. It's not what he's there for. He's there to defend the Constitution and the borders and the people of this country. He's not here to be a cheerleader for the stock market. He's not here to manipulate the market. That's for damn sure. He wants to be a cheerleader for the economy and the American people. That's one thing. But to talk about the stock market and to make comments that he knows perfectly well are going to move the markets, that's a bridge too far. And to me, that is a blatant and obvious abuse of power. Of course, nobody talks about it because a lot of people on Wall Street, they might like it because they get to trade this. They like the volatility. Traders love volatility because they can buy the dips, they can sell the tops, they can make money when it's going up, they can make money when it's going down. They love it. Now, this isn't good for the average Joe who might be retiring or is trying to formulate a portfolio and he has no idea what's going on, because the president has no idea what's going on, because one day we're going to make a deal and the next day I'm increasing tariffs. So what are you going to do? It becomes very difficult to plan. And I just don't like it. Now, one of the interesting things today if we actually look at the stocks. If we're looking at the Dow Jones in particular, because it closed up 95 points. But if you actually take a look through the Dow 30 components, it really wasn't all that impressive with the daily gains. But nevertheless, we were able to gain 95 points for the day. I think a lot of this was driven on the back of Boeing, of all companies, because there was a report out today that stated, well, you know what, because of all of the trouble that they were in with their software glitch and obviously a couple of those plane crashes as of late, well, everything might be copacetic, that they might get approval at the end of June to get those planes back in the air. So obviously that was good news for the stock. Boeing is a big member of the Dow 30, and so you saw an increase in the Dow. Now, we will see how this continues, because I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but we discussed this on episode 76A, that the president is sending 1,500 troops to the Middle East, despite recent rhetoric from the president himself saying he does not want war with the Iranians. But nevertheless, we have an aircraft carrier strike force in the area, and now we are sending at least 1,500 troops. I wouldn't be surprised if that number is higher. So that is good news, I guess, for the military-industrial complex. You know, I was sort of joking with you guys. I believe it was earlier this week, tongue-in-cheek. If all else fails, you go to war. Because we talk about all of the economic news that's coming out, all of this forward indicators that we discussed earlier this week and what we've been discussing here for the past few months, and it is not painting a pretty picture. But if we go to war, it can serve a couple purposes, right? It's a distraction, because now we have an enemy that we have to deal with, so that's supposed to bring everybody together. That's supposed to increase the patriotism in this country. And it has to be funded. So that's good for the banks, because somebody's got to pay for all this stuff. Somebody has to finance it. It's good typically for the energy companies, because you're probably going to have oil spike. Again, we anticipate oil fading unless there is a geopolitical event. Well, war would be a huge geopolitical event, especially another war in the Middle East, especially if the Strait of Hormuz gets cut off, which is where a lot of the global oil is how it has to travel. That's just the logistics of it. So that will create a huge spike in oil prices if that transpires. Again, let's hope and pray that that does not happen. But you'll have a boon to the banks because somebody has to finance the war. You're going to have a huge spike in commodity prices, so you're going to have the energy companies and other commodity industrial players doing well. And obviously the military-industrial complex will be alive and well. So you will have the Boeings, the General Dynamics, the Raytheons of the world making out like bandits. Again, war is very, very profitable, and it is a huge distraction, especially if we go in and we have to invade Iran. Iraq was nothing. Afghanistan was nothing. Look at a map. See how big Iran is. And again, look at a map. Because they are surrounded by Iraq and Afghanistan. You think that was a coincidence? Because we discussed this on the political podcast today. Because you have the likes of John Bolton, who is in this administration. I don't know how he's in the administration, but nevertheless he is. He loves war. He absolutely does. He was there during the Bush administration. I mean, how did Afghanistan and Iraq turn out? I mean, we're still there. He was eyeballing Venezuela and Iran when he was in the Bush administration and ever since. And ironically, coincidentally, we're aggressively meddling in Venezuela. We're failing, by the way, but nevertheless, we are aggressively meddling in Venezuela, and we're saber rattling quite aggressively now with the Iranians. So, what's going on here? Who has the president's ear? Because he was given an interview over the weekend, last weekend already, and he claimed he does not want war with Iran. I want to honestly believe the president means that when he says it, but then you have to look at some of these actions. We're aggressively meddling in Venezuela, and we are saber rattling with the Iranians. And I came across an article earlier today dealing with the president actually declaring some sort of emergency so he could bypass Congress so he can expedite the sale of arms and ammunition to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and Jordan. So fantastic. Fantastic. We have an air carrier strike force in the area. We are now sending at least 1,500 troops to the Middle East. I bet it's probably higher than that. And we're sending more and more weapons to our quote-unquote Middle Eastern allies. Yeah, this seems like everything's going to be perfectly A-OK. I am quite skeptical of this. I hope and pray that we do not go to war. We cannot afford it. I don't want the bloodshed. I don't want the bloodshed of American lives. I don't want the bloodshed of Iranians. I don't want the displacement of what would be millions of Iranians. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do? Who's going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for this war? But war is profitable for those who make a living in it. And it's a distraction. I hope that's not the playbook that this administration is going to use. Other administrations have used it over and over and over the course of American history and other countries. This is not unique to America. I am not simply picking on America. I am not simply picking on the Trump administration. Just read your history. This is what countries do, especially if they are having problems domestically. And my goodness, do we have domestic problems? So much so that we're not even talking about them. It's all about impeachment investigations. That's all it is. Nobody wants to talk about our debt and deficits. Nobody wants to talk about our 2020 budget. Nobody wants to talk about the crumbling infrastructure. Nobody wants to talk about the 7 million Americans 90 days plus past due on their auto loans, and that's increasing, by the way. Nobody wants to talk about the consumer being tapped out, which is evidenced by rising credit card usage and delinquencies and defaults. Nobody wants to discuss the crisis of student loan debt, which is now $1.5 trillion. Nobody wants to talk about any of these things. But we can saber rattle with the Iranians. And I don't know if we're beyond saber rattling now because we're actually over there. We're actually over there. We haven't invaded Iran, but we are now having a growing presence in the Middle East. Again, with an aircraft carrier strike force and now sending 1,500 troops. What are they going to do? What's the mission? Do we even know what the mission is? Is this just a show of force? We're just flexing our muscles. Look what we can do, Iran. Is that going to deter them from doing whatever they're supposedly doing? I have no idea. But all I do know is the more resources that we send over to that area, the higher the likelihood that something is going to go wrong. And that will be the catalyst to go to war. Something happens, you got a quick boat, from the Iranians swifting by somebody, and somebody gets bumped, and they say, oh, well, they did this on purpose, and somebody died, and that's all it takes. We got World War III going on. Because Iran they're not small potatoes. They are not the Taliban. They are not Saddam Hussein in Iraq, because we took Baghdad in 3 weeks. We will not take Tehran in 3 weeks unless we really, really take the gloves off. And if we do that, we're going to be using weapons we haven't used in a long time, if you catch my drift. That's the difference between Iraq, Afghanistan, and Iran, which is probably one of the main reasons why we haven't been in Iran yet, because we understand this. I hope the president understands this. I don't know what type of resources we are going to be using over there when we have so many issues that need to be dealt with here. If we go over there, that is pretty much the final nail in the coffin on the United States of America, because that will completely bankrupt us. That'll be it. We'll just have to get the Federal Reserve just to print money and money and money. Who's going to buy the debt? Nobody except the Federal Reserve, because nobody's going to trust that Uncle Sam and the American taxpayer is going to be able to pay it back. That'll be it. This is not an exaggeration. You have to understand how devastating the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and in Syria and in Libya and everywhere else that we're meddling have been on the finances of this country. I mean, ironically, if you understand what Osama bin Laden wanted, it was this. He knew that Al-Qaeda could never in a million years destroy the American military. But if we can get the Americans over here on our soil and have them dig in deep enough and long enough, it can bankrupt them. And my goodness, isn't that exactly what is going on? We've played right into the hands of Osama bin Laden. It's quite shocking, isn't it? That's exactly what happened, because we've been over there for 18 years. And now we're escalating. Now we are escalating. We're saber rattling with another country. With whose money? With whose lives? It's quite devastating. Everybody really has to hope and pray that the president makes the decision not to go to war. But God forbid something happens over there, even if it's a false flag, And it makes it seem like the Iranians did something to the United States. And now he's going to have to play strongman because that is the image that he is portraying to the world. Well, he's going to have to do something after that, wouldn't he? And what's going to happen from there on in? That's really what gives me a lot of concern right now, because this is sort of the wild card that can really throw everything up in the air. I mean, this could be the catalyst that tips everything over. It really could be. So, I mean, I was hoping just to be tongue-in-cheek, when all else fails, go to war, but now it appears that that might be what actually happens. I hate to end this on such a dark note, but unfortunately that's where we are. And the other thing that maybe I can discuss that's not as dark but still of concern is the U.S.-China trade war. Because is that being used as an excuse? And what I mean by that is the president using this war, and are the markets using this trade war as an excuse to sort of gloss over all of this negative economic news that comes out on a daily basis? Because despite the fact that we had a negative print on durable goods today, which is an important number, by the way, and it was not a good report, the market still closed up. Now, people might have said, well, it was sold off so much, maybe it was oversold, maybe people were trying to buy the dip, maybe people who were selling short were getting out this because it's a long weekend and they were just taking their profits from selling short. Maybe. Quite possible. It's not like this thing rallied by any spectacular measure. But nevertheless, is the trade war just being used as a tool, as an excuse to say, well, this is why Apple's down for the day. This is why Caterpillar's down for the day. This is why this company and that company's struggling. It's because of the trade war, not because of all of this fundamental data that we are seeing and discussing here on a daily basis. Forget about the economic puzzle the president and the media are telling us. Just focus on the trade war, and everything will be fine. Everything's going to go by this. Of course, we know that the trade has very little to do with it. This is all about one superpower, the United States, trying to stunt the growth of another up-and-coming superpower, the Chinese, especially on an economic standpoint. This is about the forced technology transfers. This is about the IP theft. This is about a whole host of other issues. Soybeans, cattle, pork chops. It has a whole, that's back burner stuff. But nevertheless, we're bailing our farmers out. So there's another government bailout because we are just winning this trade war so significantly. If we were winning significantly, you wouldn't have to be bailing people out, but we have to bail out our farmers. And ironically, I do believe some of these farms are actually owned by Chinese firms now. So ain't that a kick in the head? We're in a trade war with the Chinese. Chinese companies over the years have come over here, bought U.S. farmland, managed those crops. And now, because we're in a trade war with the Chinese, shipments from American farms cannot go anywhere. So now they need bailed out. So the United States, the taxpayer, is bailing out Chinese farmers. Isn't that amazing? In the United States. Can't make this stuff up. Quite amazing. So that's a little maybe happier note than going to an actual war with the Iranians, but nevertheless, it's unfortunately a lot of doom and gloom. I wish this was not the case. I truly do. I would much rather tell you, buy. This is a bull market that will continue for the next 20 years. Just buy anything in as much as you can. But that's just not the case, folks. If it was, I would tell you that, but I just don't see it that way. I think if we're going to solve the problem, we have to have an honest discussion. We have to face the problems that we have created, and then we can solve them from there. It's not going to be easy. The solutions are not going to be easy. This ain't going to happen overnight, even if we do put forth solid economic policies, which I would even be doubtful of taking place, especially in this environment. But nevertheless, buckle up is all I can tell you. It's a long weekend. Depending on what happens over the weekend, maybe or maybe not, I will have a podcast on Monday. But I am anticipating quite a bit of news over the weekend, so don't be surprised if I am here on Monday. But regardless, enjoy your long weekend, enjoy time with your friends and family, and hopefully you have the day off. This is the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.